the Living Farms podcast, the place where we discuss biodynamic practices worldwide for you, your farm, and the planet. So, welcome to the Living Farms podcast. Today we are talking about communicating biodynamic research with Martin Quantin from the Biodynamic Research Association in France. Welcome, Martin.
Good morning, Lynn.
So let's dive directly into the topic. You're in communicating biodynamic research. Could you elaborate a little bit how you came to biodynamics and what you're currently doing in your work?
Yeah, sure. Well, this is a long story, but I trained as an agronomist in an engineering school in France. And from the beginning, I've always been interested into the knowledge of the living. I've always been impressed by the life of plants, animals, the beauty of landscape, and so on. And I always have the feeling that when I learned the explanation given by materialistic science, something was missing, even if, the interaction between atom and molecules and all the biology, the microbiology is fascinating. There is a gap between all this materialistic knowledge and the concrete experience I can have by watching, being with a plant, being in a landscape, being in a place. And I always had this feeling that there was a part of the knowledge that was missing through this mainstream science that I was learning in my university process. And so at some point, I found books and literature about first Goethean science and phenomenology. And that led me to study and to discover Rudolf Steiner and anthroposophy. And this claim, Rudolf Steiner was claiming that there is a scientific way, a possible way to gain knowledge on living system, on the reality that doesn't necessarily pass it through materialistic experiments, and that through a proper training of the senses, of the thinking, of all the tools the human being have, we could gain knowledge on reality. And to me, that was really an interesting way, and I keep following actually in that way. And then I discovered biodynamic farming and all the projects that were carried by people around the world. I study, after my master's degree in agronomy, I studied biodynamics, anthroposophy, and Goethean science in California, in the US for 2 years. And from there, I started to work with the biodynamic organization in France when I came back. And with this intention of working with, on the one hand, training people, farmers, gardeners, and people interested in a broader approach to nature. And also this topic and this question of bridging materialistic science with, I'm not a defensor of spiritual science or anthroposophy, but I take it seriously as a way we should really explore. And I believe that the outcomes, the techniques, the model, the practices of biodynamic farming, for instance, as a whole, is actually provides really relevant solutions for the challenge we face today. And when I see biodynamic farms, the examples they show, what they do in the real life, to me, it's really something to follow. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, and then you started with research communication out of this inner path and way. And what are you currently doing with the Biodynamic Research Association? Like, what kind of projects are you involved in, and what is currently happening there?
Yes. So when I look at the also in the media, and I realize that biodynamic farming is really not well understood, and especially by scientists in the academic world. And when we hear there is no research, there is nothing based on science in biodynamic farming. And I've always been surprised by this statement, because of course biodynamic farming techniques don't come from materialistic experimentation. They come from intuition and inspiration, and a general worldview that provide insights, and that then came down to concrete practices such as the biodynamic preparations, or the work with the farming organism. But what today's science can do is actually study what are the results of biodynamic farming, what biodynamic farming provide and make to soil, what biodynamic farming makes to plants, to their health, to their capacity to evolve, to resist to sickness, to their capacity to produce quality food. All this science can assess, and actually we begin to have very interesting studies on these topics, and we'll talk about it most likely later. And another thing science can study is through sociological and anthropological science, how the people who carry out biodynamic farming, how they engage in their work, how they came to it, how they relate to their land, to their plants and animals, how they are in relation to it, how they care for it. All this actually is very, we found a specific position and attitude in the biodynamic movement, and it can be studied, and with the general tools of science. So there are actually not a lot, but already kind of an interesting body of literature available on biodynamic farming. And to me, it is very interesting to, when we want to talk seriously about biodynamic farming and not just discard it as witchcraft or pseudoscience, we should really take this into account. So most of my work since maybe 5 years is about making a review of all the scientific works available in all the different fields, from history to sociology, anthropology, biology, soil biology, agronomy, physiology. We actually have very interesting works from different universities, different researchers around the world. And most of the time when we hear about biodynamic farming, we don't hear these works. So yeah, my point is to make this work visible and available also in the French language, because in France I also realized that even within the biodynamic movement, people were not aware of what's available. So yeah, there's already, in a way we can say there's a lot to deal with, and in another way it's very few, and it's very difficult to draw strong conclusions out of the scattered literature available. So, but the interesting point is that it's growing, and is every year we have more and more researchers working on studying some aspects of biodynamic farming, and we have more and more paper published in academic journals, which is good. The biodynamic farming is now recognized as a relevant field of study. Yeah.
And you just mentioned that this number is growing, which I also perceive this way. And I mean, the numbers show it that more biodynamic research is existing. And do you have the feeling that this is particular in certain regions that research is doing, that more biodynamic research is done, or is it really all over the world, or are there certain specific fields where more research is published?
Yeah, well, each country has its history about the relationship with biodynamic farmers. Of course, the original and the first work we had were mostly in German-speaking country. We had the Fiber Institute for Organic Research in Switzerland that published a lot of papers and had long-term experiments, the so-called DOC trials, who studies the conventional, the organic, and the biodynamic systems as a whole. It's a system comparison for now more than 30 years, even 45 years, the oldest experiments. So they have really relevant data on the comparing organic, biodynamic, and conventional systems. So this is really interesting, and they keep going on these experiments. It's very interesting. There's a lot of publication to read about it. They mostly talk about the role of the place of animals and animal manure in the maintaining soil fertility, soil carbon, and organic matter in the soil. And they saw that if you have a certain amount of animal per hectare, let's say 1.4 cattle unit per hectare, which is what is commonly present on biodynamic farm, you have a better fertility management over the time than if you have less cattle unit per hectare, meaning half of it, 0.7. It's much less interesting in terms of fertility. So as biodynamic farming promotes the place of animal and in this idea of the farm organism, they show that this is a relevant idea for making sustainable systems. But they do not assess directly the effect of, let's say, horn manure preparation or silica preparation in their trials. So this is the kind of historical trial. And now and in Germany, they also have studied biodynamic for years. And now here in France, it's quite new that the Agriculture Research Institute start to engage and to consider biodynamic farming as a valid field of study. But they have to do it because now, especially in the wine sector, we have an important contribution of biodynamic farmers. They represent on the whole vineyards in France. I had checked the numbers. It's 2% of the general vineyard surface in France, and in some regions it's up to 6%. Here in Alsace, we have almost 6% of biodynamic farmers, which is a lot. So research cannot just ignore these people because they are not all doing witchcraft, and they have good results, and their wines are expressing something different than the other ones. And so in France, through the increase of especially in the wine sector, research is coming in, and researchers have amazing surprise, when they look at the soils, for instance, and they compare. There is a study ongoing comparing soils, the microbiology of soil, especially through the study of bacteria and fungi and all the population and how they interact, all the microorganisms within the soil, they saw that it's an ongoing study. It's not published yet, but they saw that the biodynamic fields, they have way much more life, microbiological life, even compared to organic farming and, of course, to conventional. And the links, the interaction between the organisms, which means the functionality of the whole microbiome, is much more active in fields treated with biodynamic methods. And they did this on a very important number of field studies. So they have really robust, statically robust results. So, and people are surprised. They don't know which parameters make this, but when they compare as a whole, we see, okay, biodynamic farming is making soils better. And another studies looks at the health of plants also through genetic markers and identification. They look at how the plant is able to manage and to activate some genes that are genes of resistance to stress and to fungal attacks. And they realize that biodynamic wines have a much better response to climatic and pathogens stress than organic and conventional wines. So this is really interesting. For now, it's just a fact. When we look at how plants behave, we see a difference. When we look at how soil behave, we see it's definitely something's happening that we don't see in organic farming. So, and the interesting thing is that it's also through very biotechnological methodology, metagenomics, DNA sequencing, and all this very wide methodology that we manage to have very relevant differences. Sometimes if we look just at the usual biophysical components, it's not so easy to distinguish between organic and biodynamic. But when we go into these really precise genomic sequencing methodology, we have really relevant results. Yeah.
I found it so interesting when we, as a section for agriculture, when we organized the Biodynamic Research conference in 2021, we saw that there are more and more people doing research, as you said, on the different fields, on the different aspects of biodynamics, and in various countries. And it's amazing to see that this kind of research that you're just mentioning, this precise research, which is really looking at details and really looking at the depth of biodynamics, is progressing. I just love that. so that's great to see. And
yeah, and I'm not surprised it comes from the French side, because we have the history of Cartesian and materialistic thinking, which is really strong. And of course, scientists first need to have facts at the biological and physiological and genetic level before maybe studying other aspects. But in the other way, what I'm saying is not so one-sided, because we also have in France a culture of social science, which is quite strong. It's also the country where Émile Durkheim, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, the people who founded sociological science works, also Claude Lévi-Strauss, and now more recently we had Philippe Descola, Bruno Latour, and these people saying that, we have to consider the relevancy of different worldview and how a worldview can affect the technique and even the science and the technology that we make, and that there is not just one worldview that is valid and that produce actionable knowledge. There are actually a diversity of worldview that we can rely on to produce valid knowledge for the practical life. And this is also shown by recent studies in sociology and anthropology, that if we look at because something we hear also is that, biodynamic farmers, they are just following blindly the advice of Rudolf Steiners, and they do not think by themselves, they do not experiment. But actually, when you look at who is actually really doing the biodynamic farming, you see a real diversity of biography of people, of backgrounds, and these people, they are not just following blindly Rudolf Steiner's advice. They experiment a lot, which is maybe the basic attitude in science. You make trials, you try different things, and so it's been really shown that the biodynamic community, which is not really a community because there are many people from different fields that interacts with also a lot of others communities. They are not closed on themselves, and they bring together a lot of different knowledge system and different levels of knowledge in order to make a kind of synthesis, which is really rich, in a sense.
And it's amazing that you share the experience I also have on biodynamics farms, because they're often so curious. Like, I know a lot of biodynamic farmers that started biodynamic farming out of the curiosity if the preparations really work or not, and they wanted just to test it, and then they found themselves in a lot of farm experiments they were doing. And why do you still think that communicating the biodynamic research results is, or I perceive it sometimes so much as challenging, because it's in the media often the case that, as you said, like the biodynamic research is basically not existing in the mind of the conventional media or something like this. So they often have, like, they don't know about the research results, they don't know sometimes about what is happening on the farms, and still their opinions are so strong. Why do you think that is?
Well, but it's difficult. Science is very complex, and it's not easy to communicate about any kind of scientific experiment or results to an audience or a wider public that is not somehow deeply involved in these questions, because there is many ways. You cannot just take scientific results as it is. You have to consider the whole methodology it uses, and especially it's not easy to communicate when you are in a field that is where you have so little study available. So as I said earlier, it's difficult to draw conclusions from one trials. We cannot draw conclusions from one or even 2 or 3 trials. You need much more data and repetitions to have strong conclusions. So when you have not all these data available, it makes the communication and the dissemination of information much more delicate and subtle, because you have to say, well, in this context, in this field, we tried this and we had this result, but it doesn't mean that in another context it will behave the same way. So yeah, this is challenging, and of course the way one study just take one focus or one point of view, and when you want to consider the whole body of knowledge, which would be attitude, for instance, for a journalist or someone who make a documentary or wants to have a position or an idea of biodynamic farming, then it's a huge work, and it's a huge work because it comes from a marginal or revolutionary point of view, which really requires a step aside to understand and to open to when you're not used to it. So I believe, people that are really interested, they would find the information, but then we also meet many people in the public that they have already their opinion, and they are not actually interested in science, which is made also of contradictions, and which is a path of explorations of the living process. Yeah.
So what I hear is that on the one hand, it needs more research about biodynamic farms, and on the other hand, which is why I value the work you're doing so much, is to translate the research so that people understand it, and that also people who are not involved highly in science and understand what different methodologies exist, understand what are currently the results of the research existing. And for me, this raises also the question, if we look at how could we develop biodynamic research further and the communication about the research, like how do we maybe also need to redesign research for biodynamic farming? Because I found it's quite a different concept of farming, as you said, which is very holistic. And this is sometimes difficult to grasp in this more traditional agriculture research, which is just focused on one factor. So how would you say could a research design look like for biodynamic research, or are there things that you need to consider when you study biodynamics?
Yeah, what we can hope is that through biodynamics, through studying what biodynamic farmers do and what kind of results they achieve or they claim to achieve, we build new methodology and new designs, and hopefully we find new properties of the living or of the reality through their actions. Meaning, if really biodynamic farmers make something relevant, then they should be able to make the research evolve and discover what they are doing. And if not, in the end, farmers should realize that they mistake. They are not on the right way. But I believe that the meeting and the encounter of farmers and researchers will lead to a change of both of the sides. Research and science will evolve because there is at least some truth and some innovation and some insights from the biodynamic farmers and the biodynamic movement. And in the other way, science will help and provide the biodynamic farmers also insights to be better in what they do, and maybe realize the bias and the wrong direction they are taking, because it's not black and white. It's not just like biodynamic farmers have everything to teach to the scientists, and they have to discover all the process they're working with. It's a dialogue. And but yes, I really believe that biodynamic farming will, and it's not only biodynamic farming, because there is also, to me, it's important to widen a little bit a movement that biodynamic farming crystallizes, but that is much wider in Western countries, and of course in other countries too, of people having a certain implementing a worldview a spiritualistic and a holistic worldview into practice. So, but as biodynamic farming is formalized, standardized, it's easy to take as an example of this kind of worldview. But I hope they will help science to consider better study and consider holistic systems and also different parameters of quality, because biodynamic farming, one of the main aim is to produce food of quality food, vitality, food with vitality, and that on this side we could find better methodologies also to assess what is a good product, a good food product, and there are ways and innovation in science process in this direction. Maybe we can mention the copper crystallization and all kind of morphogenetic methodologies which try to assess the living properties of a product through a reaction with of a physical element that, for instance, crystallizes, as the copper chloride crystallizes in form that expresses the life process of the product. So yeah, we can hope there's a mutual enrichment of science and biodynamic farming.
From your perspective, what would be next steps to strengthen the biodynamic research globally?
Yeah, there's many directions we can work on. One that we try to do in France and that you do also at the Section for Agriculture is to foster and to develop networking and the meeting of researchers. But maybe they don't need us really. What I see in France is that it's also happened by itself. But it's important that the different people working on biodynamic farming know each other and create a community of research where and can help each other in designing experiments and building research questions. This is important, and at least know the work of each other so that they don't do several times the same studies in the same time at two different places. So building network is one thing, and then there is also part of the work that belong to farmers or farm organization, that they go to ask scientists to work on their questions because they have many questions and they have propositions of solutions or techniques they want to experiment to respond to, let's say, climatic disruptions, better stress, hydric water stress, and all these questions. So yeah, farmers and farmers organizations should also tackle somehow the scientific institutions, saying, well, can we work together on these questions? This is important too. Yeah, and then, there's a lot. I see that science also just respond to what's out there in the field. So if biodynamic farming unfolds and develops, then the science will follow with a step after. It's always a step behind,
Yeah, that's true. Often in agricultural research, the practice comes first, and then the scientists come, and then we research what is going on and try to find different explanations or answers to the questions. Yeah, totally right. And Martin, at the end of each podcast, I always ask my guests, like, what are their personal 3 main reasons to continue to work in biodynamics and to do the work that you're currently doing. So what are your top 3 main reasons to continue the work?
Yeah, well, thank you for these questions, because it's of course, this enthusiasm to work for something is maybe the most important thing. And to me, what biodynamics brings, among other impulses, is this: it helps to develop a wider systemic and holistic thinking, and it's really missing today. Most of the actions undertaken at different levels of the society comes out of a really narrow, short-term and reductionist thinking. And I believe that the worldview and the methodology and the basics concept of biodynamic farming really help to develop a much wider view, taking into account not only productivity, yields, and economical factors, but also the wealth of an ecosystem, and the role of the human being, and the place and the happiness of the human being. And this is really important in biodynamic farms, that farms are not only places of productions, they are also places of being, where we unfold ourselves together with other living beings that are also unfolding themselves. And if we can develop this attention and this awareness of the life into these ecosystems, into these farms organisms, into these landscapes, actually this is really important, because it is out of this awareness that we are living into a living systems that is not just providing us services and food for ourselves, but that also has its own reason to be in life. Well, out of this awareness, we can really change our way of behaving and making choices. So to me, biodynamic farming offers an opportunity to consider widely our attitude towards nature. So, maybe this is the second thing: to rebuild the relationship, a living relationship with nature, is really important. Also for autonomy, because we are used to let the knowledge, not the knowledge, the choice of and the responsibility for our actions to maybe to an outside knowledge, to a scientific knowledge, that we know that it is tomorrow it will not be the truth anymore. So if we can base our actions and our choices on something that is more autonomous, that comes more from our own experience of reality, to me it's really important, because we need this autonomy of thinking and of actions to really unfold and grow as human beings. And and then the third thing is, it's connected to the others, but it's also the importance of creating and of restoring the balance of ecosystems and in the countryside, in the farm, the agroecosystems, because we have so much destroyed it through standardization and the use of chemical fertilization and treatments and pesticides and so on, that we really need to change this. And biodynamics is one component of sustainable production. And to me, it's biodynamic farming is really the biotechnology of the future.
Mm.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah. I always love those reasons of the people joining the podcast, because they're so diverse and they are so, for me, really heartwarming, and maybe also for the listeners to hear why people like you keep up the work you're doing. And for those listeners, I will link the work you're doing. So
Okay, thank you.
website
In French.
In French, yeah. So the people can learn French if they are not fluent yet. And as you mentioned in the section, we're also doing a similar work like you for translating it to different languages. And I will also link the doc trial and the research conference that happened in 2021.
Thank you very much.
Martin, thank you for joining this podcast and for enlightening us about the research communication work you're doing. It was a pleasure having you.